Get to the airport and get out. The government's advice to British citizens still in Sudan. The fragile ceasefire ends at midnight tonight, so now there's just hours, not days, for people to make it to the airstrip near the capital and board a flight to safety.
Now is the best time to leave. There is capacity, there are aircraft. Get to Wadi Sidna and we can get you out.
Also this lunchtime, we're not on the way to Wembley. Could football fans from Manchester miss the FA Cup final because of a new train strike by drivers? Gambling in the digital age and the government's plans to help people avoid becoming addicted to the apps that the Culture Secretary says can become a trapdoor to despair and isolation. Hugh Grant at the hacking hearing. The star accuses the Sun of burglaries, bugging, landline tapping and phone hacking. And Mercury rising after the late Queen star's hot pants sold for $15,000. All eyes on a big sale of Freddie's favourite possessions this summer.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. Time is now running out for British citizens stranded in Sudan. The government here said today that evacuation efforts will be potentially impossible after a ceasefire comes to an end at midnight tonight. During the respite from fighting, the British rescue mission has seen just over 500 people being flown to safety, but with more than 2,000 British nationals registered there, the pace of the UK's response has led to criticism both here and abroad. Our political correspondent Libby Vina has the latest.
A fragile ceasefire which is looking ever more precarious. This was a residential area of Khartoum where shelling appears to have started again, families sheltering in their homes. The warning to British citizens wanting to leave was stark, the Foreign Secretary saying get to the airfield as soon as you can.
We have aircraft, we have capacity, and we are saying to people that once that ceasefire elapses, and perhaps even before then, it is incredibly difficult for us to predict exactly what's going to happen. And so we are saying now is the best time to leave. There is capacity, there are aircraft. Get to Wadi Sidna and we can get you out.
Do you accept that we were late in starting this operation?
No.
So there was no delay?
No.
So far, more than 500 British nationals have been evacuated. The military say 500 a day can be airlifted to safety, but it's unclear what will happen when the ceasefire ends. Only British passport holders and immediate family members with existing UK entry clearance are being told they're eligible. But some British nationals did get out earlier with the help of the French, among them a doctor from Hampshire who's now desperately worried about the family she left behind.
The shelling was very severe near our house. There were bullets strewn around the house, and went to my sister's house. At least they had electricity and water, and stayed there until we got the email from the Irish government to say go to the French ambassador's home, where I thought I was just going to get my children evacuated, but they agreed to take me too as a British citizen. So we are safe. I managed to get my children out, but very distraught because my parents and my sister and her son and granny are still there, and each and every one is vulnerable in his or her own way, waiting to hear about when the bus will be ready to get them to safety.
Escaping by road may soon be the only option. But for now, the rescue flights continue, with these British nationals heading home from Cyprus this lunchtime. Libby Vina, ITV News.
Our international affairs editor Raghi Omar is in Djibouti, which many countries have used as a stop-off point to get their nationals out. He's just sent this update.
Well, there's hope in the sense that there are several hours left for this ceasefire before it ends at midnight local time in Sudan. And until that point, there are continuing operations by the British government and the RAF, of course, to try and bring those Brits still trapped in Sudan out. Beyond that, there is, I suppose, one could describe it as a slight glimmer in the sense that there is a regional African diplomatic body that is trying to extend the ceasefire by an extra 72 hours. Now, these are just first tentative steps. We understand that there may be talks involving both warring factions to take place in southern Sudan, which is an independent country from Sudan. Whether that comes to anything, it remains to be seen. But what I would say is from the outside that there is bizarrely an interest by the Sudanese warring factions to get the foreigners out because they don't want independent eyewitnesses to the fighting that will inevitably resume to remain inside the country. And of course, Britain and other Western countries that have people remaining, but particularly Britain, because we are the country with the most Western expatriates remaining in Sudan. We want to get as many Brits, if not all Brits, out as soon as we can. So that's the glimmer. If the ceasefire is not extended, it ends tonight and fighting resumes, then those remaining inside Sudan are left to their own, really, to try and find a way out, either through Port Sudan, where there are ships taking people to Saudi Arabia, or to the Egyptian border.
Raghi Omar, thank you. Train drivers have announced new strike dates, and one could stop some football fans travelling from Manchester to Wembley for the FA Cup final. Members of the ASLEF union, who work for 16 different train companies, including Avanti West Coast, which links Manchester to London, will walk out after rejecting their latest 4% pay offer. The drivers will walk out on Friday the 12th and Wednesday the 31st of May, and on FA Cup final day, when Manchester City play Manchester United on Saturday, the 3rd of June. Carrie Davis is at Euston Station. Carrie, take us through exactly who this action could impact.
Well, if everything was running as normal on June the 3rd, Nina, Euston Station would be a sea of football shirts, and you'd probably hear plenty of chants as well from Manchester United and Manchester City fans heading to Wembley for the first ever FA Cup final between the two sides. Instead, there's a rush to make alternative travel plans, and I've spoken to supporters groups from both clubs this morning who say it's hugely inconvenient, and there are concerns that all it's going to do is increase the already huge demand for coaches from the northwest and cause costs to spiral.
The cost of those coaches is going to increase again. That puts extra pressure on not only individual supporters, but, you know, this is a family day out for lots of them. So it puts pressure on families now to try and find additional money to make sure that they can get to the cup final. And the reality is some of them just will not be able to afford it.
Of course, the disruption is going to be much more wide-ranging next month. 16 operating companies are involved in the dispute, including Avanti West Coast, Great Western, East Midlands, Northern Railways, and as well as 3 days of walkouts, there are a string of other dates where drivers aren't going to work non-contractual overtime. Now, ASLEF Union says it doesn't want to strike, but it has no choice. They say that the 4% pay offer wasn't designed to be accepted because it's not in line with inflation. RDG, meanwhile, have called the strikes disappointing and unnecessary, and they say that they want to return to the negotiation table.
Carrie Davis, thank you very much. Thank you. Well, it's not just train drivers who are still striking. Members of the Royal College of Nursing will walk out again on Sunday, but a judge has just ruled that the strike has to be cut short by a day. The government had taken the RCN to court, arguing its 6-month mandate for industrial action in England would have lapsed on the final day of this latest strike. The RCN General Secretary, Pat Cullen, responded to the legal ruling by saying she'll now ballot members for a new 6-month mandate. Our deputy political editor, Anushka Aslana, has been following the court battle and is with me. Look, this particular dispute gets ever more messy, doesn't it?
It does indeed. I mean, just a few months ago, ministers had nothing but praise for the Royal College of Nursing, and now tensions are incredibly high. It is quite a spectacle to see the government taking a nursing union to court. So why did it happen? happen? Well, government sources say this was flagged to them by NHS employers, the group, that the final day might be unlawful outside of that strike mandate. And they say it's not about being harsh, it's about making sure that individual nurses have legal protection. They say this was pointed out to RCN days ago, and they're quite critical of the group for allowing this to go to court. And actually there, I went along to the case, they did put in a witness statement, but RCN themselves didn't actually attend inside. They stood outside and protested. Basically, they accepted in the end they couldn't make the legal argument, but they wanted to make the moral argument. They said they had a huge mandate from their members and that individual employers had not complained about the Tuesday. I saw the General Secretary, Pat Cullen, outside, and she said she thinks this will backfire.
But what he has done is he has lost the public and he has certainly lost nursing. So he has a short-term gain, but long-term there's no trust whatsoever from any of our nursing staff now in this government.
I think we got the gist of what Pat Cullen was saying. There are a few sound problems. Given we are at this stage in this dispute, what hope of it ending anytime soon?
Well, there's hope that some strikes will end because while the RCN have rejected the government's pay offer, other unions have accepted it, including Unison and Midwives yesterday. We're going to hear from the GMB union tomorrow. I've long said I think there's a good chance they'll accept it as well. If that happens, the pay offer will be delivered to health workers. But nurses are still going to go ahead with a ballot later next month, and Pat Cullen thinks that this legal battle is going to make it more likely that they will get over the line. That said, it is a very high threshold in this next vote for nurses, and we've also got doctor strikes as well.
Anushka, thank you very much. Thank you. And the spring of discontent doesn't stop there because many teachers are once again on the picket line today across England. The National Education Union says the strike by its members has led to some schools closing and others restricting access to pupils. The action impacts children whose education was disrupted by the pandemic. But the union says education is being disrupted every day because they don't have enough teachers for subjects like maths, and many are leaving the profession. So they need a better pay deal. Stacey Foster has been at a school affected by today's walkout.
Well, we are in an empty science classroom at this school today, one of many that is empty because teachers are on strike. Head teacher Darren Gelder joins us. Darren, what is the situation at your school? How are the strikes impacting lessons today?
We are partially opened. We're open for exam year students. We've got 11, 12 and 13 in. The remainder of the students are doing alternative learning from home. We've looked at their programmes of study and they're doing lessons that will be accessing off-site.
Exams are scarily close now. Are you worried about the impact for exam students?
Not worried that students aren't prepared, particularly with Grace Academy, the amount of work that's gone in with staff, and again with them being in today, staff working over the Easter period with students, giving up their time to work with them. I think the students are as well prepared and probably a little bit better than they would have been in any case.
We know that the teachers are striking over pay, but also how that pay rise would be funded. What is a non-funded pay rise likely to impact this school? How would that impact your school?
I mean, the massive part of it is where that money is going to come from. The government have said that there is an amount of money that's available out there, but equally budgets are incredibly strained at the moment. If we look at sort of just a rough breakdown of what it would be, the majority that we would see would be on staff wages, and that's teaching staff and support staff, and then we have the rest. I mean, the rest here is just as you would see at home: gas, electricity, heating, food.
The government would say they are going to give you more money though, right?
There is that, how that pays out, how that comes through, how much that would be, about the impact that we've got. Does it cover the increasing costs within there? I think, again, the devil will be in the detail with regard to what we get within that. You know, we are equally seeing, you know, the costs that most households and families are seeing as well, and we're having to meet that. Something has to give.
Thank you for joining us, Darren. Well, this is the 5th day of action that has meant that this school is only partly open, and we know that staff are expected to strike again on Tuesday.
Stacey Foster reporting next. The actor Hugh Grant has been listening to evidence at the hacking hearing at the High Court. He's accused the publisher of the Sun newspaper of burglaries, bugging, landline tapping and phone hacking. Rebecca Barry is there. Rebecca, some serious allegations of law breaking he has made.
Yeah, and Hugh Grant was sitting at the back of the courtroom listening to the final day of this hearing. He, like Prince Harry, accuses News Group newspapers of using illegal tactics to pry into his private life. But Hugh Grant's allegations go far beyond phone hacking. He accuses The Sun of burglaries to order, of bugging, of landline tapping. In his witness statement, he says, "I have been shocked by what I have unearthed," describing it as truly appalling. He accuses The Sun of using illegal tactics to obtain details about his first daughter, the birth of his first daughter, and he says he was targeted by The Sun at the same time that he was giving evidence to the Leveson inquiry, ironically, an inquiry into press ethics. Now, more than a decade ago, Hugh Grant settled the claim against the News of the World, the tabloid that closed amid the phone hacking scandal. But its sister paper, The Sun, has never accepted any liability. The court has heard claims that senior executives covered up wrongdoing by knowingly lying to or misleading the Leveson inquiry and courts, by making substantial hush money payments to former employees, and by deleting more than 30 million emails. If true, that could risk criminal charges. News Group newspapers say that these claims have been brought too late and should be struck out. A judge will decide on that at a later date.
Rebecca Barry, thank you. Police Scotland are searching a country park for a man linked to the suspicious death of a lovely, kind and diligent pregnant teacher. The body of 35-year-old Morel Sturrock was discovered on Tuesday morning at a home in Glasgow. The head teacher at Sandwood Primary School in Glasgow, where she worked, said the school community is devastated. Police Scotland says it does not believe there is any risk to the wider public. Placing a bet has never been so easy. Having 24-hour access to gambling sites on our phones has led to great fun for some, great pain for others. The Culture Secretary, Lucy Fraser, has said gambling apps have for some become a trapdoor to despair and isolation. So today, 3 years after it was announced, the government has published its proposals to try to prevent gambling addiction in the digital age. Andrew Misra reports on the changes and why campaigners want much more.
Luke Ashton became addicted to online gambling after being furloughed during the pandemic. He fell into debt and took his own life 2 years ago, leaving behind his wife Annie and their 2 children.
It's highly addictive. It's as addictive as drugs, heroin, tobacco, alcohol. Why is this addiction being treated any differently than any of those addictions when we know that people are losing lives?
Recognising the pain gambling inflicts on families like Annie's, this lunchtime the government announced tougher regulations.
When gambling becomes addiction, it can wreck lives, shattered families, lost jobs, foreclosed homes, jail time, suicide.
Among the new proposals outlined in the white paper, gambling companies will have to check on people who lose £1,000 in a single day. And similarly for punters who lose £2,000 over 90 days. They're also considering a £15 cap on digital slot machine bets, and it may impose an extra tax on gambling companies. But with gambling companies on show almost everywhere, Labour question the lack of action on advertising in sports.
The voluntary ban as it stands doesn't cover hoardings or even the sides or back of shirts. It also won't come into effect for 3 years. So in that time, what is to stop the Premier League from reverting on their voluntary ban once public attention is moved on?
This lunchtime, the gambling industry is defending its record, saying it's a very small number of punters who bet their lives away. Andrew Misra, ITV News.
The Spanish government has asked the EU for emergency funds to support its farmers through the extreme drought conditions. Temperatures in parts of the country are predicted to hit 40 degrees Celsius by the end of this week, making it the hottest April ever. The heat is around 15 to 20 degrees hotter than normal, hitting levels normally seen in July. Finally, a Freddie Mercury tour with a difference. Some of the late star's most treasured possessions, like costumes, song lyrics and paintings, are to be exhibited around the world before being sold at an auction in London later this year. Now, given a mystery buyer has just paid nearly £15,000 for a pair of the Queen's singer's hot pants, Sotheby's won't be under pressure at its big sale in September. Here's Faye Barker.
Known for his incredible talent, flamboyancy and spectacular and sometimes tiny costumes, Freddie Mercury can still draw in a crowd. These small leather hot pants worn in 1980 have just sold for £14,500, a bidding war won by an overseas fan.
It's hard to believe that anybody could fit into them. They really exemplify his personality. They're very bold, they're very provocative, they're very daring, and you know, only him could pull them off. You know, they look fantastic on him, and I think that all of those things come together to really excite bidders.
The sale of the shorts gives us a taste of the interest likely to be seen at a separate auction and exhibition of 1,500 items from the Queen frontman's former West London home. Among them, his famous replica St Edward's crown, the real version soon to be worn by King Charles III at the coronation. But along with Freddie's matching cloak, the pair are expected to fetch around £80,000. Handwritten lyrics of We Are the Champions are also up for sale, expecting to go for between £200,000 and £300,000. The star, who died in 1991, would have been 77 this September, and to mark this, some of the items will tour the world before the auction in the autumn. They're expected to raise millions in total, proof his is a legacy that endures. Faye Barker, ITV News.
Mary's here with the evening news at 6:30. From everyone on the Lunchtime team, bye-bye.